She dragged her twins through a blizzard. The Alpha King who found her swore to fight back. The sky was a dull gray, and the world seemed swallowed by ice and silence, save for the crunch of footsteps deep in the snow. Ilara stumbled forward, her small frame weighed down by a thick cloak and the precious burden she carried. Twin infants, swaddled tightly against her chest, were her only reason to keep moving. Each step was agony. Her legs ached, her fingers numb, and yet she refused to stop. The blizzard was merciless. Snowflakes, sharp and biting, stung her cheeks and eyes. Her cloak, soaked through with icy rain, clung to her like a second skin. The world around her had become a blur of white, and her lungs burned from the cold, frosty air. But she could not falter. Somewhere behind her in the distant dark, shadowed figures may have been pursuing her. She dared not look. Fear alone propelled her forward. Her thoughts drifted, fleeting and painful. How had it come to this? Just weeks ago, she had been a simple woman in a small village, tending her home, waiting for the sun to rise and set without incident. Now, she was running through a frozen wasteland, a fugitive from a world that seemed determined to take everything she loved. And yet, even in this harshest of storms, she could feel the small, warm heartbeats against her chest. Her twins. They were alive, and as long as they lived, she would endure. The snow made the journey treacherous. Hidden rocks and icy patches threatened to send her sprawling at every step. Twice she nearly fell, clutching at the cold ground to steady herself. Her breath came in ragged gasps, forming tiny clouds that vanished almost immediately in the wind. She whispered softly to the twins, soothing them with her voice, hoping that the sound of her words would reassure them as it reassured herself. "I'm here," she murmured. "We're safe. We'll make it, just a little further." She pressed on, each step a battle, each heartbeat a prayer. The landscape around her was wild and untamed, mountains rising like jagged teeth in the distance, frozen rivers winding like silver ribbons across the plains. The storm whipped around her, tossing her cloak and hair, and yet she moved with a desperate, determined rhythm. The children were counting on her, and she could not fail them. Hours passed, though time seemed meaningless in the snow. The sun, a pale disk behind the gray clouds, barely lit the world. Night threatened to fall, bringing with it even greater danger. Ilara's fingers were stiff, almost impossible to move. She dug her hands into the folds of her cloak, trying to find warmth, trying to will her strength back into her body. Her eyes stung with cold, and her vision blurred, but still, she kept moving. It was then that she saw it, a dark shape ahead, looming through the whiteness like a shadow in a dream. She froze, fear gripping her chest. Was it a tree, a rock, or someone? Her heart beat faster, not out of exhaustion, but out of dread. She could not afford to be seen. Not now, not ever. And then the figure moved, tall, imposing, and deliberate. The Alpha King of the northern wilds, Roran, appeared from the swirling snow, his presence commanding, almost otherworldly. Even through the storm, his eyes shone with sharp intelligence and something else she could not name, curiosity, perhaps, or an instinct that told him this was no ordinary woman. Ilara's breath caught. She had heard stories of him, of his power, his merciless ways, his command over the northern lands. People said he was untouchable, unstoppable, and cruel to those who crossed him. But she saw him now, and though fear rooted her in place, she could not deny the strange, magnetic pull of his presence. Roran approached slowly, carefully, as if he could sense the fragility of life she carried. The snow swirled around him, parting like water, and he stopped a few feet away. His voice, when he spoke, was low and steady, carrying over the wind without effort. "You shouldn't be out here," he said, not as an accusation, but as a warning. "The storm will take you." Ilara swallowed hard, her body trembling. She did not answer. What could she say? She was fleeing, hiding, desperate to survive. And now she faced this king, a man of immense power, a stranger who could change everything. "You carry them," Roran continued, his gaze softening as it fell upon the twins. They are strong, I see it, but even strength is not enough against this storm. Her heart raced. How could he know? She tightened her hold on the twins, instinctively shielding them. The cold wind blew fiercely between them, yet there was a strange stillness in the air, as if the storm itself paused to listen. "I will not take them from you," he said finally, as if reading her mind. "I do not mean harm, but you cannot survive alone. Come with me. I can help." Alara shook her head violently, though her body was weary. I cannot," she whispered, her teeth chattering. "I must keep going. Please just leave me be." Roran's eyes narrowed, a flicker of frustration crossing his strong features. He stepped closer, careful, measured. "You are proud, I respect that, but pride will not save you from the cold. I cannot let you die here, not when these children are in your care." Her chest tightened with fear and anger. She did not need him. She had survived this far on her own, and she would continue to do so. But as she spoke, she realized her body no longer obeyed her fully. Her legs trembled, her fingers refused to respond, and the snow under her boots was slick and unforgiving. "You think you can protect them," she said, voice wavering. "Do you understand what I've been through? What I've risked just to keep them alive?" "I do not," Roran admitted softly, "but I can help, and perhaps you were never meant to face this alone." Alara's breath hitched, her eyes filling with tears that froze almost instantly on her cheeks. Her life had been nothing but struggle, hardship, and fear. And yet, for the first time in days, she felt a flicker of hope, dangerous, terrifying, and utterly irresistible. The wind grew stronger, forcing her to shield the twins with her body. Roran extended a gloved hand, steady and unwavering. "Take my hand. Let me guide you. You do not need to fight the storm alone." Her gaze flicked from his hand to his eyes. They were not cold, as the stories had suggested. They were deep, intense, and watchful. Something about them made her want to trust him, to believe that perhaps she could survive this night. And yet, instinct screamed at her to run, to flee into the white abyss where no one could follow. I cannot," she said again, though her voice lacked conviction. The cold and exhaustion weighed too heavily on her, threatening to crush her resolve. Roran stepped closer, his presence a shield against the storm. "Then I will follow. You will not face this alone, I swear it." Alara's chest tightened. She wanted to argue, to refuse, but the storm seemed to encroach on every sense, every thought. She could barely think, barely breathe, and yet the sound of his promise was a lifeline. She took a shaky step back, struggling to hold her own resolve. "You do not understand," she said, voice trembling. "They are everything. If anything happens to them," she could not finish. The thought was unbearable. Roran's gaze softened. "I understand enough," he said quietly, "and I will not let anything happen to them. Not as long as I breathe." For a long moment the snow whirled around them, a chaotic dance of white and gray. Alara's mind spun, torn between fear, hope, and something she had not felt in a long time, the possibility of safety. And yet pride and instinct held her back. She could not surrender so easily, not to anyone, not even to a man who seemed to understand her so completely. Finally, with a bitter sigh, she shook her head and turned away, pulling the twins closer. I must keep going." Roran watched her retreat, his heart clenching at the sight. He did not pursue, not yet. He understood the need for space, the power of choice. But as he watched her disappear into the storm, he made a silent vow he would find her again. And when he did, he would not let her face the world alone. The wind howled louder, carrying her cries and the faint, desperate cries of her twins across the frozen plains. And somewhere in the distance, Roran's shadow lingered, a silent guardian in the storm, waiting for the moment when fate would bring them together again. Alara pressed on, every step heavier than the last, the storm pressing in like a living thing. She did not see the figure following at a distance, silent and patient, yet determined. She did not know that her journey had only just begun, and that the Alpha King who had found her once would not rest until he had claimed his place beside her. The snow stretched endlessly ahead, and in the heart of the blizzard, the first threads of destiny began to weave themselves into an unbreakable bond. The snow had stopped falling by the time Roran reached the edge of the forest, but the world remained blanketed in cold silence. The storm had passed, leaving the landscape fragile and still, like a frozen painting. The Alpha King moved with careful steps, each one deliberate and light, as though he did not want to disturb the fragile peace. Yet he could see her, Ilara, only a few hundred yards ahead, dragging herself along through the snow, her small body trembling under exhaustion, her arms still wrapped protectively around the twins. He paused for a moment, watching her struggle. Her determination was fierce, but her body was failing. She was almost too weak to take another step, and yet she refused his help. Pride, he knew, or perhaps fear, but it only made her all the more remarkable. Roran called out, his voice low but firm, cutting through the crisp air. "Ilara, wait!" She froze instantly, fear and exhaustion mingling in her expression. Her eyes darted around, searching for danger, and when they found him, she quickly looked away, tightening her hold on the twins. I can manage," she said, her voice shaking. "Please just leave me alone." "I cannot," Roran said simply. He stepped closer, his presence towering yet calm. "Not when you are so close to collapsing. You will freeze if you keep going alone." Ilara's lips pressed into a thin line. She wanted to refuse, wanted to keep moving even if it killed her, but the truth weighed heavily on her. She could not go on much longer. Her legs were stiff, her vision blurred, and the wind had left her numb. And somewhere deep inside, she knew Roran was her only chance of survival. He knelt down slowly, careful not to startle her. "I am not your enemy," he said softly. "I only wish to help." She hesitated, torn between fear and relief. Her heart pounded fiercely, a mixture of exhaustion, dread, and an unspoken longing she did not fully understand. Finally, with a small, shaky sigh, she nodded. Roran moved swiftly then, gently lifting her into his arms. She was heavier than he expected, yet he held her easily, her body almost limp with fatigue. She clutched the twins even closer, and for a moment he felt a pang of awe at her courage. She had carried them this far through the blizzard, refusing help until she had almost destroyed herself. "Hold on," he said, turning his gaze forward. "We will reach safety." Ilara's eyes widened slightly, a mixture of surprise and suspicion. Where are we going?" she whispered. "To my fortress," Roran replied. "It is not far from here, and there you will be safe from the storm and from anyone who seeks to harm you or the children." She looked at him, searching his expression. There was no malice there, only quiet determination, and yet she could not completely trust him. I don't need anyone," she murmured. "Perhaps not," Roran said, his voice steady and patient. "But even the strongest need help sometimes. You have carried them this far. Let me carry you the rest of the way." The trek to his fortress was arduous but silent. Roran's footsteps left deep impressions in the snow, but he moved with purpose, carrying Ilara and the twins like they were the most precious treasures in the world. The cold did not touch them under his protective cloak, yet the wind still whistled around the fortress walls, a reminder of the harsh world outside. The fortress itself rose like a frozen monument from the mountainside. Its walls were carved from dark stone, streaked with frost, and its towers disappeared into the clouds above. Roran's eyes glimmered as they approached, a mixture of pride and something else, something softer, almost vulnerable. This place, despite its cold and imposing exterior, would offer her and the twins the protection they needed. Once inside, Roran set Ilara down gently by a roaring hearth. The warmth washed over her like a healing wave, melting the ice that had formed over her muscles and bones. She let out a long, shaky breath, closing her eyes as relief flooded through her. The twins stirred, sensing the change in warmth, and nestled closer to her chest. "You will stay here for now," Roran said, his tone firm but not unkind. "The storm is over, but the world outside is still dangerous. You need rest." Alara shook her head, instinct still telling her to move, to flee, but her body refused to obey. She sank onto the floor by the fire, the twins held tightly against her, and for the first time since the blizzard began, she allowed herself to feel exhausted. "Why? Why are you helping me?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Roran leaned against the stone wall, arms crossed. "Because it is right," he said simply, "and because something about you and them tells me you are not meant to be left alone." Alara's eyes met his, searching, skeptical, but something in the sincerity of his gaze made her hesitate. There was no malice there, no demand, only a promise she wasn't sure she could trust, yet somehow wanted to believe. Days passed in the fortress, the twins slowly recovering from the cold, their tiny bodies gaining strength with each passing hour. Alara stayed close to them, wary of the world outside, wary of Roran, and yet she could not ignore his presence. He moved through the halls silently, a guardian whose eyes missed nothing. At times, he would bring food or blankets, or simply sit nearby in quiet vigilance. And each time, Alara felt the stirrings of something she could not name, trust, perhaps, or something stronger. Roran, for his part, observed her closely, fascinated by her courage, her determination, and the tenderness with which she cared for the twins. She was fragile, yes, but also unbreakable. Every gesture, every whispered word to the children showed a strength that matched, and perhaps even surpassed, his own. He had faced armies, storms, and betrayal, yet he had never met anyone like her. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the frost-covered mountains, casting long shadows across the fortress, Alara sat by the hearth, the twins asleep at her side. She traced her fingers over the edge of a blanket, lost in thought. "You think too much," Roran said softly, stepping into the warm light. His voice did not startle her. He had a quiet way of appearing that seemed to flow with the wind. "I cannot help it," she said, glancing at him. "There is so much I do not understand." "Who wants to harm my children, and why?" Roran sighed, lowering himself onto the stone floor across from her. "There are forces in this world that do not understand kindness or innocence, but you have something they cannot destroy, your will and their life. That is why they want to take it, but you will not allow them, will you?" Alara shook her head firmly. "Never." Roran's gaze softened. "Then they will not succeed, not while I am here." The fire crackled between them, and in that quiet moment, the tension that had lingered since their first meeting seemed to settle, replaced by something fragile, something delicate, yet unspoken. Both were aware of the growing bond, though neither could name it aloud. There was something in the way he watched her, protective yet respectful, and in the way she regarded him, cautious yet curious. The quiet was shattered suddenly by a low, eerie howl outside the fortress walls. Alara's heart jumped and she instinctively clutched the twins closer. Roran stood immediately, eyes sharp, scanning the mountains beyond. "Stay here," he commanded softly. "Do not move." The sound of the howl echoed again, long and mournful. It was not merely the wind. Something moved in the darkness outside, something patient, calculating. Roran's jaw tightened. Alara's hands trembled slightly. What is it?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Enemies," Roran replied. "But do not worry, they will not reach you here." Even as he spoke, he moved to the doors and windows, checking locks, ensuring that the fortress's defenses were ready. The twins stirred at the tension, but Roran's calm presence reassured them, as much as it reassured Alara. After a few tense minutes, the sound faded, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. Roran returned to her side, his face calm but eyes thoughtful. "You are stronger than I thought," he said. "And yet, you cannot face everything alone. That is why I am here." Alara met his gaze, searching for hidden motives but found only honesty. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the wall around her heart began to shift. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to believe that she could survive, that they could survive. Not alone, perhaps, but together. As night fell over the fortress, the fire casting flickering shadows across the walls, the twins slept peacefully, unaware of the dangers outside. And in the quiet warmth of the stone hall, Ilara and Roran shared the unspoken understanding that this was only the beginning. The storm had passed, but the world outside remained dangerous. And somewhere in the mountains, unseen eyes watched, waiting for the right moment to strike. Yet, for the first time, hope flickered in the cold. The sun rose slowly over the frost-covered mountains, casting long shadows across the fortress walls. Inside, the warmth of the hearth still lingered, but the chill from the snow outside seeped into every corner, reminding them of the dangerous world beyond the stone walls. Ilara sat on the floor near the hearth, the twins asleep in her lap. Their tiny chests rose and fell gently, a rhythm that brought her both comfort and unease. She had survived the storm, reached the fortress, and for a few moments it had felt like safety. Yet her mind was restless, filled with questions she could not answer. Roran watched her from a distance, leaning against the stone wall, arms crossed. His presence was steady, protective, but not oppressive. He had grown accustomed to her wary glances and sharp replies, yet he never took offense. He knew her caution was a shield, one she had built to protect herself and her children, and still he could not help but feel drawn to her resilience. "Ilara," he said softly, stepping closer, "you have been silent since yesterday. What weighs on your mind?" She looked up at him, eyes shadowed with worry. "The twins, their life. Who wants them? Why? And why do I feel that their survival, their very being, is somehow important?" Her voice trembled slightly, betraying her fear. Roran's gaze softened, but a shadow passed over his face. "Because it is. There are forces in this world, old and powerful, that do not understand mercy. They fear what they cannot control. And these children, they carry something that is rare and precious, something that could change the course of this land." Ilara's heart raced. She had known the world was dangerous, but she had never imagined that her children might hold such power. Her grip on the twins tightened, almost instinctively shielding them from the thought. "They are just babies," she said, her voice breaking. "How can they carry anything more than life itself?" Roran knelt in front of her, meeting her gaze with intensity. "Power does not need understanding, Ilara. Sometimes it simply exists, and it chooses its carriers carefully. These children were chosen." Ilara's mind whirled with questions, fear, and an unspoken wonder. Chosen? By whom? For what? She glanced down at the twins, their small hands twitching as if sensing her thoughts. The weight of responsibility pressed on her chest, heavier than any storm or snowdrift. Before she could ask more, a sudden movement outside the fortress drew both their attention. Shadows shifted along the snowy walls, quick and silent, moving with a purpose that set Roran on edge. "They are here," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "The ones who seek the children, they are close." Ilara's pulse quickened. She had hoped the fortress would be a sanctuary, but now the danger had returned, more immediate and more frightening. She clutched the twins, feeling their warmth, their life, and her determination hardened. She would protect them, no matter the cost. Roran moved to the doors and windows, his eyes scanning the dark forest beyond the walls. "They are skilled, trained to hunt," he said. "But they do not understand the fortress as I do. You and the children are safe here for now, but we cannot remain passive. We must act before they strike." Ilara nodded, her fear mingling with a growing resolve. She had survived storms and cold, carried her children through death's grip itself. She would not cower now. Over the next few days, Roran and Ilara prepared. The fortress, though strong, had weaknesses that needed shoring up. Roran moved with precision, checking the gates, reinforcing the stone walls and setting wards around the towers. Ilara, hesitant at first, learned quickly. She watched him carefully, absorbing his knowledge, and began to assist, finding a strange comfort in purposeful action. One evening, as the cold wind howled outside, Roran approached her while she tended the twins. His eyes were intense, a mixture of worry and admiration. "Your strength, it amazes me," he said quietly. "You have endured more than most could imagine, yet you continue to fight for them for yourself. You are unlike anyone I have ever met." Alara glanced up, unsure how to respond. Compliments were rare in her life, and she was unaccustomed to receiving them. "I only do what I must," she said softly. "They are my children. I will not fail them." Roran's gaze softened. "And you will not as long as I am here." The days passed, yet the tension never fully lifted. Shadows moved just beyond the fortress walls, and the air seemed thick with anticipation. Then, one morning, the twins stirred violently, their cries louder than usual. Alara rushed to them, her heart pounding, sensing something unusual. They are waking," she whispered, watching in awe as a faint glow surrounded them. The light was soft, warm, and pulsing, and it seemed to react to her presence, to her touch. Roran stepped forward, eyes wide with amazement. "They are awakening, the power is within them," he said, his voice filled with both wonder and concern. "This is what I sensed. This is why they are so important." Alara's hands shook as she held the twins. She had known they were special, but this was beyond anything she had imagined. What does it mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It means they carry a force that could change the world," Roran replied. "And that is why they are being hunted. You must protect them always." Alara felt a surge of determination. The storm had tested her, the cold had tried to break her, and now she faced a new challenge, one that required more than courage and endurance. She had to embrace the unknown, to protect her children from a danger she barely understood. As night fell, the fortress grew quiet, the twins sleeping once again. But the danger had not passed. From the shadows beyond the walls, figures moved silently, their intentions clear, their focus unyielding. They were patient, waiting for the right moment to strike, unaware that their prey was stronger than they had imagined. Roran stood guard, his eyes scanning the dark forest. He was aware of the threat, but he was also aware of something else, the growing bond between himself and Alara. He had begun to understand her strength, her courage, and the fierce love that drove her to protect her children at all costs. And in that understanding, something shifted within him, a desire not only to protect her but to stand beside her as an ally, a friend, perhaps something more. Alara, too, felt the change. She had grown to trust Roran, to rely on his strength and wisdom, even as her heart remained guarded. There were moments when their eyes met, and the world seemed to shrink around them, leaving only the warmth of connection amidst the cold, frozen fortress. But the calm was deceptive. One night, as the wind screamed through the mountains, a powerful force struck the fortress. The stone walls trembled, ancient magic flaring in response. The intruders had found a way in not by force alone, but by manipulating the very elements that guarded the fortress. Roran reacted immediately, positioning himself between the intruders and Alara, his movements swift and precise. The twins awoke, sensing the danger, their cries piercing the night. Alara clutched them tightly, fear and determination coiling within her like fire. "You will not touch them," she whispered fiercely, her eyes flashing with defiance. The intruders hesitated, sensing something in the children that they could not control. A glow surrounded the twins, stronger now, pulsing with life and power. Roran's jaw tightened as he realized the depth of their abilities, a force ancient and untamed, tied to the bloodline that flowed through their tiny bodies. Alara felt a surge of strength, a protective instinct that pushed her beyond fear. She had carried them through storms and blizzards, she could carry them through this. She met Roran's gaze, and in that moment, wordless understanding passed between them. They were no longer two separate forces, but a single unit, united in purpose, driven by love and duty. Together, they faced the intruders, the power of the twins illuminating the dark halls. And for the first time, Alara understood the truth that Roran had hinted at, the twins were not merely vulnerable children. They were the heart of a legacy, a force capable of shaping the world, and it was her role, her destiny, to guide and protect them. The night was long, the battle of wills unseen but fierce. By dawn, the intruders had retreated, their shadows dissolving into the morning mist. The twins slept once more, exhausted by the release of power, and Alara held them close, her heart still racing. Roran stood nearby, watching her, his expression a mixture of awe, concern, and something deeper, something he did not yet fully name. "You did well," he said quietly. "They did well. All of you are stronger than I imagined." Alara met his gaze, exhaustion and relief mingling with a quiet pride. "We survived," she said softly. "That is what matters." But even as they breathed a momentary sigh of relief, a thought lingered in their minds. This victory was only temporary. The forces that sought the children would return, stronger, more cunning, more determined. And when they did, Alara and Roran would face challenges that would test them in ways they could not yet imagine. Yet, in the quiet aftermath, there was a moment of peace. The bond between them had grown, tempered by danger and trust, and the twins slept safely, their power contained but alive. And somewhere in that quiet, frozen fortress, a promise began to form, a promise that together they could face whatever the future held. The dawn light broke through the frost-covered windows, illuminating the faces of mother and protector, and for a moment the fortress felt like a haven. But the shadows outside lingered, waiting, watching, and the bloodline's burden had only just begun to reveal its true weight. The wind had softened into a gentle, mournful sigh, carrying the chill of the mountains into the fortress halls. The first light of dawn crept through frost-covered windows, casting a pale glow on the stone floors. Inside, the warmth of the hearth battled the lingering cold, and Alara sat by the fire with the twins asleep on her chest. Their tiny breaths were steady, their bodies calm, but the air around them thrummed with a quiet energy she could feel in her bones. Roran stood nearby, arms crossed, eyes scanning the horizon through the narrow windows of the fortress. The intruders had retreated, but he knew this peace was temporary. There were always those who would covet the power of the twins, and he could not allow them to strike again. His jaw tightened at the thought. "Alara," he said, his voice low, breaking the stillness of the room. "We must be ready. They will not give up. Soon they will return." Alara lifted her eyes from the children, worry etched into her face. "I know," she said softly, "but we've faced storms and we survived. We can face this too." Roran's gaze softened as he studied her. "It is not just survival," he said. "It is about what we protect and why. You have shown a strength that surpasses mere endurance. And the twins, they are more than you know. Their power is ancient, tied to the bloodline that both frightens and fascinates those who seek it." Alara's fingers brushed the twins' soft hair. "I only know that I must protect them. Nothing else matters, not even me." Roran moved closer, kneeling beside her, and for a brief moment the fortress felt smaller, warmer, safer. "You do not have to carry this alone," he said quietly. "I am here. We are here together." She looked up at him, surprised by the gentleness in his eyes, and something in her chest shifted. For so long, she had relied only on herself. She had trusted no one, not even the strangers who had once seemed friendly. And yet now, standing beside this man who had risked himself for her and her children, she felt a strange, cautious hope. Before she could respond, the fortress trembled. A deep, resonant sound echoed through the stone walls, the arrival of a force older, stronger, and more determined than any they had faced before. The intruders had returned, but not alone. The air crackled with magic, an energy that twisted the frost in unnatural patterns, and the twins stirred in their sleep, sensing the change. "They are here," Roran said, his voice sharp now, full of command. "Stay close. Do not let them touch the children." Alara nodded, gripping the twins tightly. Her heart pounded in her chest, a rhythm that mirrored the power awakening within the children. She had carried them through storms, through blizzards, through fear itself, and now she would face the greatest storm of all. The doors of the fortress groaned as the intruders forced their way inside, their forms shadowy and unnatural. But before they could reach the children, a bright light erupted from the twins, enveloping the room in warmth and brilliance. The intruders recoiled, shielding their eyes. Elara gasped, marveling at the sight. The twins' power was no longer faint or subtle. It was alive, raw, and beautiful, a force that could not be contained. She whispered soothing words to them, feeling the strength of their connection deepen. Roran stepped forward, standing protectively in front of her. "Do not fear," he said firmly, his presence steady. "They will not harm you, not while we stand together." The intruders hissed, recoiling as the twins' light grew brighter. Their forms flickered, unstable against the children's power. Roran's jaw tightened as he realized the magnitude of what they held, a force that could shape destinies, a power that demanded respect and care. Elara felt a surge of courage. She had carried the twins through impossible odds, guided them through danger, and now she understood that their strength was as much a part of her as it was of them. "You will not take them," she cried, her voice echoing through the halls. "I will protect them with everything I am." The intruders shrank back, unable to approach. The twins' energy pulsed in response to her words, a luminous shield born from love, courage, and unyielding will. Roran's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, a silent gesture of solidarity and strength. Together, they faced the intruders, two forces intertwined, a mother and her children, a king and his ally. And for the first time, Elara realized that the storm within her was no longer hers alone. It was a storm shared, a force that could challenge even the most ancient and determined adversaries. The intruders wailed in frustration, their forms destabilizing under the light of the twins. The fortress trembled, yet stood firm, its walls strong, its magic intertwined with the Alpha King's presence. Roran moved with precision, guiding the energy of the twins, directing their power without diminishing their innocence. "Focus," he said quietly to Elara, sensing her fear and hesitation. "You are not alone. We are together. Trust the children, trust yourself." Alara's hands shook, but she nodded. She had faced fear before, had walked through blizzards and storms, and now she would face this. She drew a deep breath, speaking softly to the twins. "You are safe. I am with you. We are together." The light from the twins surged, bright and unyielding, pushing the intruders back until they vanished into the shadows, unwilling and unable to continue. The fortress fell silent, the only sound the faint crackle of the hearth and the soft breaths of the sleeping children. Elara sank to her knees, exhausted, her arms still wrapped around the twins. Tears slipped down her cheeks, not of fear or sorrow, but of relief, pride, and an unspoken wonder. She had protected them. They were safe. And together they had faced the storm of power and darkness, and they had survived. Roran knelt beside her, placing a hand gently on hers. "You did it," he said quietly. "We did it. The children are safe, and so are you." Elara looked up at him, her eyes shining. "We are together," she said softly, almost in disbelief. I never imagined it could be like this." Roran's gaze softened, and for a moment the weight of responsibility, danger, and history melted into something simple, pure, and undeniable. "It is because of you," he said. "Because of your courage, your love, and your strength. You carried them through storms and darkness. You have proven that nothing can break what is bound by love." Elara's lips curved into a small, tired smile. She had survived so much, yet now, for the first time, she allowed herself to hope not just for her children but for herself, for the possibility of peace, and for the bond she shared with Roran. The days that followed were quiet, a rare reprieve from the chaos that had consumed their lives. The fortress, strong and enduring, became a sanctuary. The twins thrived, their power gentle and steady, no longer a threat but a part of their family's life. Elara moved with grace, tending to them, her confidence growing with each passing day. Roran remained near, a steady presence, guiding, protecting, and sometimes simply watching, allowing her space while never leaving her side. The bond between them grew, tempered by danger and strengthened by shared struggle. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the walls around Alara's heart began to shift, letting in warmth, trust, and something more. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, casting a warm glow over the frost-covered landscape, Alara stood at the edge of the fortress walls, holding the twins. Roran joined her silently, his presence calm, reassuring. "They are safe," he said quietly, his gaze sweeping the horizon. "For now, but the world will always have challenges. What matters is that we face them together." Alara nodded, the twins cooing softly in her arms. "Together," she repeated, "always together." Roran placed a gentle hand on her back, a protective, tender gesture that spoke of unspoken promises and shared futures. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Alara allowed herself to believe that love, trust, and courage could endure. That even in the coldest storms, warmth could be found, and that even the smallest hearts could hold the greatest power. The fortress stood silent beneath the fading light, the shadows retreating as if acknowledging the strength within. The twins, innocent yet powerful, slept peacefully, their bond with their mother unbreakable. And standing beside her, Roran, the Alpha King, felt a quiet pride, a sense of destiny fulfilled. Together they had faced storms, darkness, and fear, and emerged stronger, united, and unbroken. The wind whispered through the mountains, carrying with it a promise of new beginnings, challenges yet to come, and the enduring strength of love. The bloodline's burden had been faced, its weight carried with courage and compassion. And in the quiet aftermath, mother, children, and king looked to the future, knowing that whatever trials awaited them, they would face them together. The sun set behind the frost-covered peaks, painting the sky in gold and crimson. In the heart of the fortress, warmth, love, and hope bloomed. And though the world outside remained wild and untamed, within these walls, a family had been forged, strong, united, and ready to face whatever the future might hold. Alara looked down at her children, then at Roran, and felt a peace she had never known. They had survived storms, faced dangers beyond imagination, and discovered a strength within themselves and each other. The bond between them was unbreakable, and the love that had grown through fear and hardship now shone like a beacon, guiding them toward a future full of possibility. And as the last light of day faded, a quiet smile touched Alara's lips. They had survived. They had triumphed. And together they would face whatever lay ahead, hearts unyielding, spirits unbroken, and love eternal.